Sometimes, though, relationships and friendships get to a point where you have to have a hard conversation.
Yes. Hard conversations, I think people shy away from them because they consider them to be confrontations.
Right.
Conflict, a bad thing.
Yeah, those are, I think, the moments in relationships that really define them, that either make or break a relationship, or you ignore it and then resentment just builds up and it just ruins a relationship over time.
Yeah, and before you know it, you're fighting over something small and it just completely is blown into this big mess and you can never recover from it.
We had everything going against us.
Yeah, we were young, we were broke, we didn't know anything about business. We literally started from nothing.
We were never supposed to make it. So let's talk about going into those hard conversations, because I think a lot of people can write down a list of either other people or conversations they should have, and a lot of times we run from them. So if I'm not someone who's comfortable with confrontation, or even if I am, that doesn't mean I do it right.
Correct. Yes. Even if your intentions are good, I think just jumping into a conversation, if you don't really know what the best way to go about it is, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So I wrote down kind of a recipe of before you even have the conversation, going into it.
Yes.
3 things that I ask myself to make sure that I'm, in the right state of mind in coming from the right place. So number 1 is, am I being fair and consistent?
Okay.
Like in what I want or what I expect or why I'm upset. Consistency is a big one, because then otherwise the other person goes, well, what the heck? You just last week, so am I being fair? Another thing I wrote down is, am I focused on the actual resolution or am I just trying to be right?
Yeah.
Because
that's a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one, right? Because just because I don't agree with what happened or I don't agree with what the person did or said doesn't mean that what they did or said was wrong, right? So it's a possibility that I'm just trying to be right. And if I go into a conversation just trying to be right, how good is that going to go?
It's not going to go good. It's going to completely go the opposite direction of what you're hoping to achieve in this conversation.
Right. And then the third thing I wrote down is, am I in a good place, mentally, to actually have this conversation?
Yeah, if you just had a bad day and you got in a car accident and you were late to work and you spilled your coffee all over yourself, that's probably not a good day to have hard conversations, because you're already going to be irritated. And so you want to make sure you are in a complete, clear headspace.
Right. So let's talk about the actual conversation.
Yeah.
What are a couple key points? And first of all, what are examples of hard conversations? Sometimes they're with business partners. Sometimes they're with children. They're with your kids. Sometimes they're with family. Sometimes they're with friends. Sometimes they're with significant others, right? In a more romantic relationship or in a marriage or whatever it may be. So there's a lot of places that you can have difficult conversations. How do you know it's a difficult conversation?
If it makes you uncomfortable. If you hesitate to even bring it up. If in your head you're thinking, oh, but they should know. They should know that would have bothered me. Then
right.
It's one of those conversations.
So sometimes someone may go, because I saw this in a comment on our resentment talk. They said, well, what do I do if the other person's not willing to have a conversation? Or what do I do if the other person's not willing to listen to me at all? Or what do I do if the other person doesn't seemingly care? So is that still a conversation you should attempt to have?
I don't think so. It takes 2 people to have a healthy conversation. And if whoever you're trying to talk to is already telling you, I'm not interested in hearing, I'm not interested in repairing, I just don't want to talk to you, then how can you repair it?
What if it's a relationship you really care about? I
would express that. I would definitely reach out and express that and see how that goes. But you shouldn't, if it's a relationship you really, really care about, it's worth the effort of trying to do a better job at conveying that that's why it's so important to you.
So let's talk about the actual conversation then. One thing we wrote down is listen when you go into the conversation, right? Make sure you ask the first 3 questions to yourself to make sure you're in the right space. But then when the other person's talking, listening to understand, right? Versus, I think most people listen with only one intention, which is to reply.
Yes.
Or even worse, emotions go up and logic goes down, and they don't even reply. They listen to react,
Yes.
right? Which is the worst thing you could do. But listening to understand, talk about that for a second.
Listening to understand, it's not you agreeing with the person. Listening to understand is trying to see things from their point of view, trying to understand why it is that they feel that way. That way you can kind of move towards that resolution. And I think part of it is, and this is logistics, right, is that conversation has to be had in a place where you can freely talk. So, you know, probably not at work or via text message. Those are not good places to have these conversations because you need to be able to listen to what they're saying to you.
One thing that people say a lot, and I read a book that said that this is like, you're not supposed to do this. And maybe it's just the wrong usage of the word. But people feel, they say, well, the other person doesn't validate how I feel,
Yes.
right? In the book I read, it said that validating is bullshit. But I also read another one that said you're supposed to do that. So when we talk about validating, and I think that goes with listening to understand, right? Which
Yes.
is validating doesn't mean I agree with you.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean I go, oh, you're right. You know what? You're right. It just means that I acknowledge that I genuinely understand how or why you feel however you feel.
Yeah. And as a human, you have a right to feel those things.
Right. So listen to understand. Next, you said confirm that you understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Meaning you might think you understand what they're saying, but it could be completely off base. And so it is important to go, hey, I really want to make sure I understand what you're talking about. When you said this, is you feel like this, right? Because I did this, and so on and so forth. Like reiterate it back to them so they can say, yes, exactly. That's exactly how I feel. Or no, you completely missed the point. And then I want to understand. So explain it to me again.
Okay. So then we said, I think a really big thing is to genuinely, to the best of your ability, really look at it from the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
And I think this is where a lot of people struggle in these conversations, is because there's a lot of ego in the way. And these conversations never, ever, ever go well if your ego is offended and takes things personally, right? So if I'm focused on the resolution, if I genuinely go into this conversation, I go, you know what, Ronnie pissed me off because she did this. I think like 75% of the time, or at least half the time, I would say, these hard conversations often turn out to be a misunderstanding.
Exactly.
But if I go, you know what, Ronnie pissed me off, she did this, I'm going to freaking tell her, like, that's it. You know, like, that's the wrong attitude.
Yeah, it's definitely the wrong attitude. It's the wrong energy, the wrong everything.
So, in the wrong intention, right? Because the intention is I'm going to go make myself feel better.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to freaking let her know how I feel, right? So, genuinely looking at it from the other person's perspective, right? Sitting there going, okay, if I'm her or I'm him right now, like, how do they feel? Why? Even if I think it's so stupid, why are they so bothered by this?
Right.
Right? And trying to really understand from the other person's perspective. And I think communicating from a place of care is a big thing. You know, the other day, you guys, I had this, I was frustrated about something. And so I told Ronnie about it. And she goes, I don't remember I honestly don't even remember what it was. Otherwise, I might talk about it, but I don't remember what it was. And she's like, well, did you call them and tell them? And do you remember what my reply was? I said, actually, I didn't, because I don't respect them. And I'm no longer going to have conversations like that with people that I don't respect, because there's no resolution there anyway.
Right. It's just a waste of energy.
Right. It's a waste of energy, because if I don't actually respect that person, means there's a reason for that, right? And so then I'm like, well, why am I going to go fight over something with someone who the relationship really doesn't matter to me anyways?
Right.
Now, if they came and wanted to talk about it, that's another story. But I think in these hard conversations, these are conversations for myself that I really only feel are necessary if it's with someone who I really genuinely care about our relationship.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important. And I think along the same lines of him saying, you know, you're trying to find this resolution, you're not trying to be the winner of the fight or winner of the conversation. Again, like he said, you don't need to agree with their reaction. Like if you said something that you felt was totally harmless, as an example, and they took great offense to it, you don't have to agree with their reaction. But you should be able to, if it's somebody you care about, you should be able to go, you know what, regardless of how this happened, I love that person, or I really care about that person, and I don't want them to feel that way.
Right. Right, regardless of what actually happened. I just don't want them to feel like I don't care.
Because again, you're focused on the resolution.
Yeah.
The solution, not, you know, again, keeping score.
During those conversations, also, it's, I think, important to communicate almost kind of in a soft way. Meaning, like, there are words that when you're having a conversation, a difficult conversation, that sometimes just don't work good. One of them is you. Well, you,
Blaming words.
you. Every time you say you, it's putting the other person on defense, right? Where they're constantly, if the person I'm trying to resolve something with constantly feels like they have to defend themselves, it's very easy for those conversations to escalate into arguments, right?
Yeah.
So one thing I read in a book said to take you out and to go with, well, I feel like, versus, well, you this. If you lead all your sentences and everything you say starts with you, right? It's everything's being put on the other person externally.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of you pointing your finger at someone.
Yeah. You, Sherry. Right? So better to go, well, I feel like when you said this, blah, 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 versus, well, you said da, 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 da.
Right.
Now, there gets to a point where it's okay to disagree.
Yeah, of course.
Because we don't have to be right. The main outcome is I'm not fighting to be right. I'm fighting to just fix this relationship, right? To clear things up, to make sure there's no misunderstandings, to get this stuff out of my head so that we could have a good time together.
Yeah.
But eventually it's okay to disagree sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to agree with... There's literally no one on this planet who you're going to agree with 100% of the time. So it's natural. It's good for relationships, friendships, everything. It's normal.
Now, let's talk about something real quick.
Yeah.
That could be a little controversial.
Uh-oh.
Sometimes it's okay to just cut people off.
I agree. Yes.
Now, here's why I say this. As a society, we have this this constant conversation about romantic relationships ending all the time. And that's normal.
Yeah.
But I think we have... we don't talk at all about the fact that it's normal also for friendships to end.
Yeah.
I think we often expect that friendships are to last an entire lifetime, but then we accept the fact that relationships break up all the time. And so I think sometimes it gets to a point where just like people outgrow each other sometimes in romantic relationships, friendships are no longer compatible too.
Yeah, it's normal. Most of our friendships as adults are based off of convenience almost, which is kind of sad to say, but it's because, you know, you work together, you go to the gym together, you have something in common with that person that's significant in your life. And then sometimes, you know, you no longer work together anymore. And so you go off and do something else, they do their thing, and you just no longer have the same interests,
Right.
same conversations.
Right. And then the problem with that is it's not to say you go cut off your friends,
No.
but some relationships, some friendships, they don't feel good. They don't feel good, right? Something feels off. And then we keep the relationship sometimes out of obligation. And that's where resentment creeps in, I think, because we're operating from a place of feeling like we have to versus... you know, it's actually a friendship that I enjoy.
Yeah.
And so I think cutting people off sometimes is okay. And sometimes you have to do that in order to create space for other relationships that, you have a lot more values in common.
Yeah, and it usually when it's that type of relationship that has just expired, it's no longer benefiting either one of you, and it, like you said, it just kind of feels, like ugly. It doesn't feel good anymore. The second you break apart from that person, you will feel a sense of relief. You will feel a weight lifted off your shoulders because that was what you were supposed to do all along. You were just holding on to something that's not even there anymore.
Right. Just like in business. Grant Cardone says, if someone quits, then I should have fired him 6 months ago, And so he always gets mad when someone quits on him versus him firing them, right? Relationships, friendships, a little bit different, but the point is that you carry on. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I think the hard conversations don't even necessarily have to happen in these settings sometimes. Sometimes it's just slowly things just...
Yeah, you stop talking as much, you don't hang out as much anymore. So one of those does not require a, hey, we need to talk conversation, like I'm breaking up with you sort of conversation with your friendships. It's just you guys are naturally growing apart and just let it happen.
Yeah, one good test, you could do this. If you have any of these relationships in mind where you feel like you're the reason the relationship's still going, or maybe it's not reciprocated on the other end, is stop calling that person and see what happens.
Yeah, stop texting.
Stop texting them first, see what happens. Sometimes you realize your phone will never ring.
Yeah. You are carrying all the weight of that relationship.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you. I think these are topics that are people get a lot out of nowadays.
Yeah, and I feel like I've personally learned the hard way in having conversations by having a lot of wrong conversations. And any way that we can help you to make it easier, I'm all for it.
Yep. Thank you guys for your support. When we post a teaser clip, those of you that share it, we really appreciate it. Yes. And we look forward to resharing it too. It's good to know you're getting something out of it and you enjoy it just as much as we do. So
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. We appreciate you. And I hope you have an amazing life.
All right, y'all. We're out. Amazing life, huh?
Yeah.
Amen.
I was going to say day, but I mean, could do better than that, right?
Boom.